Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and of course, in celebration of this week's stellar Cyrax trailer, I thought that what better way to celebrate her return than to do a full-on history of breakdown and analysis. One that covers her character, her creation, as well as her changes and alterations across all three mainline timelines. It will allow us to see and understand just how she has evolved from the arcade era into that of the new present. How each and every different iteration is slightly different from era to era. Now, just before we jump into talking about her own history, let's talk about the behind the scenes creation of the character to understand the inspiration behind Cyrax's design. So this takes us back all the way to the 1990s, during the development of Mortal Kombat 3. Here, Cyrax would be part of a new entourage of ninjas, one forged in steel by the now new Cyber Lin Kuei. He would be one of 3 cyborgs introduced in this installment, alongside Sector, the Crimson Ninja, who could fire rockets and utilize fire, and then the returning Smoke, a secret character from Mortal Kombat 2 who had also undergone the procedure. Thus, we do have a very new iconic trio in the game. The overall design of the cyborgs themselves do actually derive a lot of influence from Boba Fett and the Predator, hence the heavily armored design and the dreads. Plus, in super early development, where they didn't have names, they were officially dubbed as Ketchup and Mustard. So with all of that said and covered, let's officially get on to talking about the character's history and origin. Officially, very little is known about the early life of Cyrax, only that he derives from Botswana, having presumably been kidnapped by the Lin Kuei as part of their very early recruitment process. During this time period, Cyrax was able to prove his worth very early on, rising through the ranks and making a name for himself with his incredible utilization of bombs and nets. Such talent and such skill did catch the eye of the clan's Grand Master, seeing him as the perfect candidate for his Age of Steel, the Cyber Lin Kuei. But such assimilation wouldn't happen until the latter half of the original trilogy, following the defeat and subsequent death of Bi-Han. The fall of their greatest champion could be seen as a sign of their weakness. The Grandmaster would invoke the Cyber Initiative, starting a vast and bloody harvest that butchered their own recruits into automated automatons, with Cyrax forced against his will and turned into the Lin Kuei unit known as LK4D4. Of course, such drastic changes would receive some pushback, but those voices of defiance would very quickly be silenced, with Cyrax and the Grandmaster's grandson, Sector, paired up together in order to hunt down and forcibly assimilate anyone that escaped their grasp. Thus, their gaze would turn towards Smoke and the new Sub-Zero. Naturally blindsided, Cyrax and Sector were able to gain the upper hand, successfully retrieving Smoke but losing Sub-Zero. Due to Tomas's capture, he would now be cyberized coming into the events of MK3, and the Lin Kuei themselves had in fact forged a pact with Outworld's Emperor, Shao Kahn, looking to assist in the Conqueror's invasion. So this finally takes us into Mortal Kombat 3, where the world of Earthrealm would burn, and Cyrax would be dispatched to hunt down Sub-Zero, while simultaneously being ordered to kill every Earthrealmer he could find, officially turning the Lin Kuei traitor. During this siege, Cyrax would finally track down Kuai Liang, but was surprised to see that Kuai had not only defeated Smoke, but had restored his mind, releasing him from the grasp of the Grandmaster's perversion. So with the odds evened out, Cyrax and Sector would clash with the cyberized Smoke and Sub-Zero, being defeated by their former allies. His defeat though didn't necessarily mean the death of Cyrax, because in the middle of Shao's invasion, Kuai Liang, having known how focused the Emperor would be on the merge, would actually reprogram Cyrax, having it so the yellow cyborg could infiltrate their ranks and assassinate the Emperor behind the scenes. Tragically though, such efforts were in vain. Shao had actually already been defeated by Liu Kang, and with no more orders given to him, being severed from the Lin Kuei's control, Cyrax would malfunction, wandering aimlessly into the desert and winding up stranded, which now all does tie into Mortal Kombat 4. Cyrax's body would actually be found and retrieved by the Lin Kuei, yet the time he had sustained in the desert had done a lot of damage, forcing him to undergo an upgrade in order to improve his mainframe, making him stronger, faster, and deadlier. Yet the separation had really taken its toll, as Cyrax's soul began to claw its way back to the surface, having flashbacks from a life he once had. During Shinnok's invasion and following Shao's siege, the Lin Kuei would attempt to regain some form of notoriety, putting them in direct conflict with Sub-Zero, as well as the Outworld Investigation Agency. And inevitably, after clash after clash after clash, Cyrax's programming began to fail him, with rampancy taking a toll on his being. He sought out help from the likes of Sonya Blade and Jackson Briggs. Knowing that he wasn't beyond their reach, the two would take him back to their headquarters and finally free Cyrax from the Grandmaster's control, finally regaining his own sense of being. So this now takes us into the events of Deadly Alliance, and it's here where we learn that upon being freed, Cyrax would become a valued member of the Outworld Investigation Agency, protecting Earthrealm from all sorts of supernatural threats, combating them on both Outworld and Earthrealm's plane. Unfortunately for him, during one of his trips to Outworld, he would be attacked by the Zarteran Syzoth, damaging his teleporter and stranding him in the barren wastelands. He was lost and desperately needed a way back home, and such desperation naturally sprung an opportunity. The cyborg would be approached by the vampire Natara, who understood how dire his situation was. So she offered to assist him for his journey back, but understandably at a price. If Cyrax was to travel to the volcanic pits of Outworld and obtain an ancient orb hidden beneath the pits, then she promised to let him go. And with no other choice, Cyrax was forced to accept this offer, very swiftly completing this job. With the goal achieved, the vampire saw no need of the cyborg anymore, honoring her end of the deal and casting him back to the world of man, which marks the end of Deadly Alliance. Unfortunately, following this return, very little is kind of known of what became of him, because his time stranded in Outworld meant that he wasn't present for the downfall of the Outworld Investigation Agency. In fact, he wasn't even present during the events of Deception or the fall of Onaga himself. Regardless, Cyrax would make his last and final return in this timeline during the events of Mortal Kombat Armageddon, having taken a part in the onslaught, joining the forces of light. Both sides were evenly matched until the Pyramid of Argus arose. Knowing the unfathomable power that sit atop it, this battle very quickly turned into a free-for-all, with the fighters all equally scurrying to the top. And Cyrax was no different in that regard, as he jumped atop the back of Shiva, only to then be flung by her in the chaos. In terms of continuity, this would technically be the last time we do see him, as during the opening of Mortal Kombat 9, he can be seen dead on the staircase of the pyramid, having perished shortly after Armageddon cinematic. So this now of course takes us onto Mortal Kombat 9, serving as both a sequel and reboot to the original trilogy. And Cyrax in this timeline would undergo a few minor changes, such as his relationship with Sector being a bit more explored, revealing that he is against the Cyber Lin Kuei, and probably the most important one is that he now appears during the first tournament instead of Outworld's invasion, meaning that the Cyber Initiative hasn't begun, and we get to actually encounter Cyrax in his human form. Here, he is seen alongside Bihan and Sector during the opening ceremony as one of the representatives of the Lin Kuei, having been hired by Shang Tsung to eliminate the Earthrealmers, despite they themselves, of course, having derived from it. Together, they do play relatively minor roles in the story, serving as antagonists that are defeated by the heroes. Our first real exposure to Cyrax would be during Scorpion's chapter, where we can see him arguing with Sector over the inhumane nature of the Cyber Initiative, Before this conversation can conclude though, they would be interrupted by Scorpion. Irritated by the sheer arrogance of the Spectre, a fight would erupt between both sides, with Hanzo Hasashi easily overwhelming their assault. This commotion though does gain the attention of Bi-Han, whom suffers an even worse fate than them in death itself. With the demise of their comrade, it's here where Cyrax would be approached by the Thunder God Raiden, having overheard their conversation and being well aware of the Cyber Initiative. An argument that causes Cyrax to reveal his true colors and feelings. By reaching out to his better nature, having Cyrax realize the actions he's causing could very well be the death of his own world. He begins to contemplate his actions and whether or not they are truly for the best. Such a discussion though would be seen as treason amongst Shang's operatives, believing him to be a traitor amongst their ranks. To eliminate any whistleblowers, Shiva and Baraka would be assigned to assassinate him. Yet such insolence would not be tolerated by the ninja, who very quickly defeats them before then proceeding to the tournament, confronting Shang Tsung for his treacherous ways. However, before there can be a true resolution, the tournament would begin, with Cyrax being forced to fight Johnny Cage, defeating the actor but sparing his life, doing it out of sheer defiance and bitterness towards the host. These actions disgusted Sector, believing that once he was cyberized, such insubordination would no longer be an issue. And finally, this pushes Cyrax over the edge. Branded as a traitor, Cyrax would fight for his freedom, immobilizing Sector as he runs away. Now this is a very bittersweet moment, because while Sector is able to escape the tournament, he is not able to escape the clutches of the clan. By the events of the second tournament, where we are finally reintroduced to him, he has once again undergone the Cyber Initiative. And of course, much like the original timeline, Cyrax would once again be in pursuit of the remaining Lin Kuei members, with Sector after Smoke and Cyrax after Kuai Liang. But there would be some pretty big changes and alterations here, because unlike the past, instead of Smoke falling to the hands of the clan, it is the Cryomancer. Following Kuai Liang's capture, we do see the Lin Kuei pledge their loyalty to the Khan, all in preparation for the events of Outworld's invasion, which then takes us onto the MK3 section, and Cyrax plays a very minor role here, having taken part in the Lin Kuei's mass assault on Earthrealm. He can be seen battling the likes of the Shaman Nightwolf in a losing effort, but the damage had been done, because once they left, Sindel would arrive, causing a reign of terror that would forever change the course of this timeline. Unfortunately, following this point, Cyrax would be completely absent during the events of MKX, with the only remaining remnants of the Cyber Lin Kuei being the remains of Sector. And also keep in mind that the MKX comic book line was retconned 4 years ago, so in a way we don't actually know what becomes of him here, simply that he's believed to be long dead. From a gameplay perspective, however, he does return in a very peculiar way, being one of the variations of Triborg and functioning more as a game mechanic than an official character, as Triborg itself is non-canon. Now Cyrax's last and final appearance in this timeline would be during the events of Mortal Kombat 11. Here, the current present would be splintered and spliced with the time period of the second tournament of Mortal Kombat 9, caused by the Titan of Time Kronika to bring the villains of the past to that of the present. Because of this very strange and very unique blend of realities, it does mean that the Cyber Lin Kuei would return, with Cyrax naturally being one of the figures among them. And oh boy, in this new timeline, with the Cyber Initiative alive, they would immediately begin a mass harvesting of Kuai Liang's Lin Kuei. With Frost as their new Grand Master, Cyrax and Sector would assist in the mass slaughter, doing irreparable damage to Kuai Liang's vision. Even when they're interrupted and found by Scorpion and Sub-Zero, the damage had been done, so they are forced to dispatch of the former friends and enemies. And by defeating Cyrax, Kuai Liang is able to restore him back to his former being, disgusted by what has become of him. Thus, in one selfless act of sacrifice, Cyrax would destroy the Lin Kuei communication tower, severing their control over the cybernetic units, marking the end of this particular Cyrax. Thus, this brings us on into the present day of Liu Kang's new era, a reality that is sewn by his hand, with many things having been changed and altered from the previous timeline. And Cyrax is not excluded in that regard, as her official bio does say the following. Cyrax was born into the Zakai, one of the Lin Kuei's many subclans. For generations, it's maintained a quiet presence in Niger's Air Mountains, where it stands ready to defend Earthrealm. A martial arts prodigy, Cyrax was the youngest Zakai to become an active Lin Kuei warrior. That success earned her an invitation to serve directly under Sector. Cyrax seized the opportunity with her trademark vigor, but while her skills have endeared her Sector, her independent streak has not. Despite Sector's best efforts to break it, Cyrax will remain untamed. She will serve the Lin Kuei on her terms, or not at all. So here, in terms of origin, things do look to be incredibly different for the character, as she now descends from Niger, not Botswana, and her recruitment into the Lin Kuei is done completely different, as she earned her entry into the clan, instead of being kidnapped and raised into it. Now of course, there is the elephant in the room, of this of course being a gender-bended take on the character, but it doesn't seem to be a change nor alteration that affects the character's core personality, as she still does retain that rebellious streak. Now what do we know of her currently? Well, for the new era, after Bi-Han and Kuai Liang's fallout, with Sub-Zero as the clan's new Grand Master, both Cyrax and Sector are naturally following his lead, which in turn leads to the attack on the Wuxi Academy during Kuai Liang's wedding to Harumi. As for how this goes, that is something we must wait and see. Alongside this iteration of the Cyber Lin Kuei isn't your traditional take on them, now utilizing suits of armor opposed to being harvested into puppets. So from what you can tell, there have been some pretty big changes and creative liberties taken for this iteration of Cyrax and the Lin Kuei. In the grand calculus of all of this though, I'm almost certain that this is but a mere footnote in a much larger narrative, simply the blueprint and first steps towards the Cyber Lin Kuei's return. The real question now is, will Cyrax escape their clutches this time, or are we doomed to see history repeat itself? We must wait and see. But for now everyone, that's been it for me. As always, I do hope you have enjoyed this video and learnt more by doing so, because there's a lot going on here, especially with some of the big alterations and changes Cyrax has gone from timeline to timeline. But I can't deny, it's great to have them back after so long, because Cyrax hasn't been their own official character since 2011. Now of course, what are your thoughts on the Cyrax changes? Which version of the character is your favourite? Please do comment down below. For now though everyone, that's been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you soon.